Welcome to Just a Minute. Hello, my name is Nicholas Parsons, and as the Minute Waltz fades away, once more it's my pleasure to welcome the four entertaining personalities who this week are going to play Just a Minute. And we welcome back three of our regular players of the game, Peter Jones, Derek Nimmo and Paul Merton. And we welcome someone who's never played the game before, and that is Craig Ferguson. Would you please welcome all four of them? Beside me sits Jane Stevens, who will keep the score and also blow her whistle when 60 seconds are up. And as always, I will ask our panellists to speak on the subject that I give them, and they will try and do that, as always, without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. Paul Merton, would you begin the show this week? The subject, reports. Will you tell us something about that in this game, starting now?
He spends far too much time trying to be funny. I remember was a comment in one of my school reports when I was about 8 years old. I thought this was a very harsh judgment at the time. My history reports, I suppose, were probably my best. I did love that particular subject, and I had a very good teacher. We specialised in the English Civil War, I remember, and it was a fascinating period to actually be looking at in close detail. This, of course, is a wonderfully turning... I suddenly thought nobody's challenged, and it put me off.
All right. Craig Ferguson, first time on the show and first challenge. What is it?
Hesitation? Bit of a bumbly moment, really,
yes,
wasn't it?
You get a point for a correct challenge. You take over the subject. There are 28 seconds left, starting now.
There is a famous naval memo that, starting... I haven't done it before.
I know you haven't done it before, and I will be generous to you. You did...
Well, there's no point me saying anything then, is there, really?
I haven't a clue what's going on.
Craig has never been on the show before. Take a nice deep breath, Craig. You've got another point. 24 seconds. Reports starting now.
Reports can be broken down into two words, re and ports. Although the word re isn't really a word unless you come from a different country where the word re means report.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Repetition of re.
Yes, re is not the word on the card. So
Can I have another go then?
Yes.
Give him another go. He's a newcomer.
16 seconds for you, Derek, on reports starting now.
I am going to report Nicholas Parsons as the Director General of the British Broadcasting Corporation for not only being a liar, but a puffed-up buffoon as well. And why we shall have to have him on this...
Peter Jones's challenge.
That has never been a disadvantage at the BBC.
Peter, I not only agree with the challenge, but the thing is that it actually endorses what Derek's just said. And the fact that this audience should clap
Why didn't you put it to a
every time
vote?
they say anything anti-Parsons, this mob that we've got in off the streets. Peter, you've got in with 3 seconds to go on reports starting now.
Who's not... Oh,
No. Correct challenge.
what, you're a buffoon?
No, you were deviating. That's what Peter's challenge was. Wasn't it, Peter?
Yes, deviating, that's right.
3 seconds for you, Peter, starting now.
My masters wrote so badly that I couldn't actually read the comments.
That whistle tells us that 60 seconds are up, and whoever is speaking at that moment gets an extra point. And it was Peter Jones on this occasion, so he has a lead at the end of the round. Peter, your turn to begin. Losing at just a minute. I don't know whether they've given you that subject to start with.
No, I can't imagine.
No. Peter, 60 seconds on that subject, starting now.
Losing at just a minute is something I never really mind doing. It's playing the game that counts. Now, it's not like losing the Battle of Bannockburn, for instance.
Craig Ferguson, challenge.
Hesitation?
Yes, he looked at you, a good Scot, and said Bannockburn, and he...
Yes, that's
dried
right.
up
Bit of
completely.
fear creeping in there
That's
as well,
right,
I
yes,
thought.
definitely. 52 seconds for you, Craig, to tell us something about losing at just a minute, starting now.
Losing at just a minute is something I'm looking forward to immensely, as this is my first appearance on the programme. Although I have to say that losing at just a minute is not something that's ever happened to me before. Sometimes I've thought about losing at just a minute and thought...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Well, he just went to pieces.
Yeah.
38
Very
seconds.
difficult, actually. You don't think...
It's the fact you've got 3 other fellas breathing down your neck, ready to jump
That's
on
never
you.
been a problem for me, but...
Well, that's your...
Don't listen to him, it's just jealousy.
38 seconds for you, Peter. Losing at just a minute, starting now.
Sometimes I have aroused sympathy, and on one memorable occasion, I had a bouquet of flowers from Emma Freud, Clement's daughter. Admittedly, she was only 10 at the time. It was fairly early on in our long run in this show. And I haven't had anything from her since, unfortunately, since she's grown into that lovely woman that appears on television.
Craig Ferguson.
Definitely deviation of a different type of a thing.
Well, he's gone right off about Emma Freud.
Yeah, exactly.
Right away, losing at just a minute.
Yeah.
Right.
But she sent me the flowers, you see.
I know, but you went on about wanting more from her and everything.
It's an outrageous suggestion.
I went on. Of course I went on. That's the purpose of this bloody game. Is to go on.
Yes, but you didn't go on in the right vein. So,
Yeah.
deviation with you, Craig. 17 seconds, starting now.
Losing at just a minute is something that is hurtling towards me ever...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, Derek, and you've got him with 12 seconds on this subject, starting now.
The way to lose at just a minute is to say something nasty about Nicholas Parsons, and then he can...
Peter Jones a challenge.
I know the way to lose.
Give Peter an extra point. Derek gets a point for being interrupted. He keeps the subject. 9 seconds left, Derek, starting now.
If you hesitate, deviate, or repeat a subject, then you will lose at just a minute. I have to go as slowly as possible so that Paul Merton can't...
Well, Derek Nimmo was speaking then when the whistle went, gained the extra point, and he's equal with Peter Jones in the lead. Then comes Craig Ferguson and then Paul Merton. And Craig, your turn to begin. The subject, what fascinates me? Will you tell us something about that in this game, starting now?
What fascinates me are insects. I love insects, especially with a bit of cheese.
Paul Merton, you challenge.
Repetition of insects, I'm
Yes.
afraid.
Your insects came in very rapidly after you'd said it.
There's a lot of them. There's over 6 million species of insects.
Paul, you've got in with 56 seconds on what fascinates me, starting now.
What fascinates me is insects. I love them. I love the ones with the great big...
Hoisted on your own petard. Right, Craig, you got back in. 50 seconds, what fascinates me, starting now.
The spider is not one of the things I call...
Derek Nimmo challenge. There was an yes. And I think the spider's not technically speaking an insect.
I was
is
going
it?
to say that. I was going to say an arachnopod.
Oh, you were. That's why you were, because you couldn't get the word out. That's what it is. 47 seconds, Derek, starting now.
What fascinates me is why the British Broadcasting Corporation continues to pay us to talk absolute rubbish about something we know nothing about. The years go by, and we sit here getting older and even more infirm and talk this total garbage and actually are using up the license fees. What's the matter?
Deviation, sure.
Yes. He might be getting old and infirm, but he shouldn't speak for everybody.
Well, yeah.
And this is no place to commit suicide.
It was deviation, because if the show wasn't popular and successful and go round the world, it wouldn't be kept on. So
Cholera goes around the world. It's popular.
29 seconds for you, Craig, on what fascinates me, starting now.
What fascinates me is the way I buzz.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
The way I.
Well, yes, another hesitation. Sorry, Craig. 26
It's not a
seconds.
hesitation, it's a speech impediment.
You get a grant for that, don't you?
26 seconds. What fascinates me, Derek, starting now.
When one goes south of the equator, what fascinates me is the way the water goes down the plug hole the opposite way round. And also that if one sits in a deck chair and you expect the sun to go...
Peter Jones a challenge.
Repetition of one.
You had one at the equator and one in the deck chair. So...
I certainly didn't have one in the deck chair, I can tell you.
Peter, I agree with your challenge. 14 seconds. What fascinates me, starting now.
People fascinate me more than anything, really. I like watching them, and I divide them into 3 basic categories. Those who are saying to themselves, I've got it. The others say, I've lost it. And the third category say, what is it?
Craig challenged you after the second category.
Repetition of say.
Well, listen, Craig, you've got in very cleverly. First time on the show, 2 seconds to go. What fascinates me, starting now.
What fascinates me is the way that
So Craig Ferguson is learning very fast. Not only speaking when the whistle went, getting an extra point, he's actually, at quite an early stage in the show, taken the lead alongside Derek Nimmo. That's 1 point ahead of Peter Jones. Derek, your turn to begin. The subject, a bank loan. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
The first time I required a bank loan, I went to see some whores that I knew, C. Hore and Company, bankers who were on Fleet Street, the silent leather bottles, and have been there since 1672. Henry, who was the head of the firm, gave me a very generous bank loan of some £5,000, which may not seem a lot, but at the time it purchased me a flat in which I still live. I'm very happy with bank loans and always have with these particular bankers who are so generous and so amiable and so well-mannered, charming, and the family...
Craig Ferguson challenge.
Repetition of so.
There were 3 so's. 2 we might let go, but 3 we can't. Sorry, Derek. Craig's got in on 28 seconds, a bank loan starting now.
If you want to have a bank loan, the best idea is to go to your bank manager and suck up to him. Maybe prostrate yourself on the way into the office and say what...
Paul Merton challenge.
Well, this is deviation, isn't it? There was a phrase there that I wasn't sure about at all. I've heard of the listening bank, and the bank that likes to say yes, but No, I won't say that. No.
But, I mean, a lot of people do have to suck up their bank manager they want to loan.
Used to be just filling a form in my day.
Well, some people have to suck up to them. Great. I disagree with the challenge. You have 17 seconds to continue on a bank loan starting now.
Of course, you don't want to overdo it in front of your bank manager and appear...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Repetition of bank manager.
You said bank manager the previous time. 14 seconds for you, Peter, to tell us something about a bank loan starting now.
They're very dangerous things to have because the banks often change their mind just as you're having a difficult period, if you're in a small business, of course, and they ask for the money back. Well, this is outrageous, and it's ruined thousands of businesses all over the country.
Well, Peter Jones got a round of applause for speaking as the whistle went, and Paul, it's your turn to begin. The subject, my mistake. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
My mistake was to enter show business. I was so much happier down at the farm with the pigs, geese, ducks, cattle, and all kinds of different animals.
Craig Ferguson challenge.
Deviation.
Why?
With the animals, and I'd rather not go into it after that.
But he wasn't deviating from my mistake. No, I disagree, Craig. I'm sorry.
Craig? Well, I think I deserve a point for being called Craig about men.
He calls everybody Frey.
Oh, does he? Okay.
You thought I said Craig Ferguson, did you? Instead of Craig Ferguson.
This is a bit of a blind alley, this,
I
really.
know.
Or an Ind Blally.
I disagree with the challenge, so you now continue, Paul, with 50 seconds to go on my mistake, starting now.
My mistake was to sell all those antiques that were lying around the house. My father was a cat burglar, and he would come back from such places as Croydon with a sack full of objets d'art. And it was worth a fortune. I took it along...
Craig Ferguson challenge.
There are no objets d'art in Croydon.
Well, no, my dad's got them all. He was a very successful burglar.
What I like to do on these occasions, Craig, is we give you a bonus point because we enjoyed the challenge. Paul gets a point for being interrupted, and he continues with 36 seconds on my mistake, starting now.
My mistake was I didn't enlist in time for the Second World War. I rushed down to the recruitment office, I put my name down,
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Oh, deviation, he obviously wasn't old enough.
Well, I thought that's what he was coming to.
He said he rushed down to the recruiting office.
I was in a pushchair, it was downhill, just straight in.
You could still have rushed down to the recruiting office. It's been 2 years old. I mean...
Couldn't have happened. He's not 45 or whatever.
I was too young by minus 12 years.
So, Derek, it's probably your challenge. And
It was certainly my challenge. There's no probability about it. I challenge.
it's very difficult on just a minute to admit that you made a mistake. I've made very few in the 26 years, but I think that was one of them.
But they have been the same ones over and over again.
Oh, dear.
You were about to gain something there, Paul. I've watched it. Right, 28 seconds for you, Derek, on My Mistake, starting now.
My mistake was once when I was appearing in a show in the West End of London and had to catch a railway train to Manchester overnight because I was doing a television the next day. I took a sleeping pill during the second act, got into my pajamas and dressing gown and into a taxi and went to Euston Station. Unfortunately, after arriving at the destination, they told me that the railway carriage had been delayed for some hour and a half, and there I was, going fast asleep on the platform.
So they let Derek continue with his story because they wanted to know the payoff until the whistle went, and he got an extra point for that. Peter, it's your turn to begin. The subject, behaving badly. Something that never happens in just a minute, I'm sure. You have 60 seconds to tell us something about that subject, starting now.
Well, it does happen quite often, but I think it's inexcusable. Everybody should behave very nicely, and I think if the other panelists watched me and observed the way I conduct myself, then it would be a much better show altogether, more refined, and we might enlarge our audience all over the world, you know, particularly people in South America, where we are rather thin on the ground, as far as...
Paul Merton challenged.
Hesitation,
Yes, he got to South America and couldn't continue. Right, Paul. 36 seconds are left. The subject behaving badly, starting now.
I like to think that Adolf Hitler behaved very badly in causing the Second World War. He was told, don't go to Poland, and where did he go? That's exactly the place he went. He'd been warned over Czechoslovakia, and before that over the Ruhrland in around 1935, or Derek might say 1937, but I think it was 19, what I said earlier.
Derek Nimmo challenged.
Repetition of 19.
There was 19, you repeated. Derek, 14 seconds, behaving badly, starting now.
Nicholas Parsons' mother used to behave very badly. She used to write letters to me complaining about my appearance on Just a Minute, and also threaten me with the most terrible things if I mentioned her name again. Unfortunately, sadly, she was gathered.
Derek Nimmo not only did behave badly, but he gave another example of it then. But he did keep going till the whistle went and gained an extra point for doing so. Craig, your turn to begin. The subject, balloons. Will you tell us something about those in this game, starting now?
If a Glaswegian calls you a balloon, it's a derogatory term. Phrases like, that balloon on the karaoke machine thinks he's Julio Iglesias, are heard often in pubs and clubs around the city. Other balloons that are known in Glasgow are Partick Thistle football team, who are known as the famous balloons of the north side of Glasgow by the way they hang about the...
Paul Merton challenge.
Repetition of Glasgow.
Oh, yes, there's too much. It's a pity, because I love Glasgow. It's my adopted home. I did 5 years in Clay, but I was down there.
I thought it was in Glasgow there for a minute.
You don't know that, Craig. I'll come from there. I'm still you. It's sure right, Jimmy. Oh, I'll give you what it's all right.
Could I possibly have a point for being patronised?
If you close your eyes, you'd swear you're in Surbiton.
Balloons is with you, Paul. 40 seconds are left, starting now.
A balloon could be described as a rubber sphere full of helium. One of my favourite moments in a moment...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
It would be an incorrect description because it can be full of anything. It doesn't have to be full of helium to be a balloon.
He said it could be full of helium. That's one example of a balloon. Peter, you look very...
Well, naturally, I'm trying to find objections.
I know. This is what they do. They look at me with such disbelief as if to bluff me out of my decision.
No, I'm not trying to bluff you at all. No, it seemed quite genuine to me.
No,
and if I were
sorry.
chairman, I certainly award a point to me.
I try to be fair, Peter, and I think to be fair, he wasn't deviating. So 32 seconds with you, Paul. Balloons starting now.
The Montgolfier brothers are generally credited with the invention of the first balloon which could carry a man up into the air.
Craig Ferguson
The
challenge.
balloon didn't carry the men, the basket carried the men. The basket underneath the balloon carried the men up into the air.
Yes. So, Craig, you've got in with 23 seconds on balloons, starting now.
The balloon I like best of all is the Christmas...
Paul Merton challenge.
Repetition of Partick Thistle. You never know with Nicholas. You never know. You might get it.
He only said Partick Thistle once, so Craig, a wrong challenge. It was a try-on. 20 seconds left on balloon starting now.
The greatest balloon of all time must be Harry Seacombe, known throughout the world as a great singer and balloon impersonator. And it's very difficult to impersonate balloons.
Paul, you challenge.
Repetition of impersonator.
Yes.
No, impersonate.
Repetition of great then.
All right, Paul. 9 seconds.
All right, Paul. But just because he's persistent, he's still wrong.
He hasn't got a clue whether you said great twice or not.
You did say the great impersonator and the great Harry Seacombe. 9 seconds. Balloons with you, Paul, starting now.
Partick Thistle are known for the quality of their balloons, even bigger than Harry Seacombe's. They come to...
Craig, you see, it doesn't matter. You get out, you get back in, you get more points, and you've got him with 2 seconds to go on balloons starting now.
One of the most wonderful balloons I have ever seen.
So our first-time player of the game is doing extremely well, not only getting a point for when the whistle went then, but he has gone back into the lead, 3 ahead of Derek Nimmo. And Derek, your turn to begin. The subject, Europe. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
The division between Europe and Asia is generally believed to be where the Ural Mountains commence and then go down and drop into the Caspian Sea. Europe is perhaps, in fact, indeed, is the second largest continent north.
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Bit of hesitation.
Yes, I think so. Absolutely right.
Yes. 45 seconds, Peter, for you to tell us something about Europe, starting now.
Well, if Africa can be correctly described as the cradle of civilization, then I think Europe is the playpen, because that's where human beings developed some of the finest achievements and inventions, artistic things they did, wrote plays, including Shakespeare, of course. I would put him into that category. And
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Well, sort of a hesitation. It was all sort of grinding
Actually
on.
running down. He was sort of talking himself into the ground. I'm sorry, Peter.
I was rather pleased with the first phrase, and then I couldn't...
You were sounding so erudite to begin with, and it suddenly sort of evaporated, didn't it?
Yes, quite right. Don't rub it in.
21 seconds for you, Derek, on Europe, starting now.
Europeans were extremely fortunate because we found here the main domesticated animals, goats, sheep, cows, and of course horses, beasts of burden. The Americas had no such good fortune, nor did Africa. That is why we, I suppose, became preeminent amongst...
Paul Merton challenge.
There's a slight sort of hesitation in there.
A very slight hesitation, but not enough to penalise him, I don't think. So, Derek, I give you the benefit of the doubt. 5 seconds to go on Europe, starting now.
The smallest state within Europe is the Vatican, which only has 1,000 inhabitants. The largest is...
So Derek Nimmo kept going to the whistle went, and with an extra point there, he's now moved forward. He's equal in the lead with Craig Ferguson, and in second place also equal are Peter Jones and Paul Merton. And Paul, it's your turn to begin. A good party. That's the subject. Could you tell us something about it in this game, starting now?
One of the finest parties I ever heard about was Nicholas Parsons' 18th birthday party. Who should be there? Kaiser Wilhelm, Edward VII. Some marvellous figures from the great historical past. Boadicea popped in with the drinks, and they all cheered him to the rafters. They said, one day you will have a successful career in show business. How wrong could they...
I think there was a hesitation, a show business.
Yes. I couldn't think of the word to describe what you do, Nicholas.
I think show business is quite good, actually.
Right, Craig, another point to you, and 40 seconds on a good party starting now.
One of the finest parties I've ever been to is a party given by Partick Thistle many years ago when they won the Scottish First Division.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Well, it's all Scottish...
That's it, yes.
No, that's how it's pronounced.
They pronounce it like...
I've told you, I come from that part of the world. You're not going to kid me on that one. Right. 32 seconds for you, Derek, on a good party starting now.
Oh, my goodness me. I think the best party I ever went to was a transvestite party. And I went as Marlena Dietrich with my beautiful...
Craig Ferguson challenge.
Transvestite party's definitely a deviation of some sort, isn't it? Yes, but...
Well challenged and well spoken, Craig. We give you a bonus point because we like the challenge. The audience did as well. Derek gets a point for being interrupted. Keeps going. 26 seconds left. A good party starting now.
My 7-year-old grandson, George Howard, had a particularly good birthday party last year on the 9th of December. We had crackers and an incredible magician who poured out a snake, which he put over the top of all these little boys, and they remained very still beneath it. Then out came an owl and some bats, and it was a very good party indeed. And then we had jelly and cake.
Right, Derek was speaking again as the whistle went, but other points were scored in the round. He's now one ahead of Craig Ferguson, as he was in the last round. And Peter Jones and Paul Merton are still equal in second place. And Peter, your turn to begin. The subject, models. Can you tell us something about those in just a minute, starting now?
When I was a boy, models of farm animals and railway engines and things like that fascinated me, and I used to play with them all day. I had a little table.
Paul Merton challenge.
Sort of hesitation there.
A table, yes.
Yes.
49 seconds for you on models, Paul, starting now.
I once went out with a beautiful model who later turned out to be Derek Nimmo. Imagine my surprise. Full, low, blonde hair, tight-fitting skirt, absolutely wonderful, charming company, and particularly good in bed. I couldn't believe it. I was amazed when I discovered some 5 years later, after a passionate affair, that I can only...
Craig, well, surely extreme deviation there.
We must be allowed to lead our own lives.
I wanted to hear more, actually, about the affair.
I'll bet you
I was
did.
quite interested myself.
30 seconds for you on models, starting now.
Models work almost exclusively on catwalks, although sometimes they get their photographs taken. A catwalk is named a catwalk.
Paul Merton's challenge.
Repetition of catwalk.
Too many catwalks, yes. Right, 23 seconds on models with you, Paul, starting now.
I can still remember those luscious red lips mouthing the words, I love you. Take me away from all this. My real name is Belinda. Don't think of me as... Got any buzz?
I couldn't bear any more of this stuff.
So
I'm
you-
sitting next to him, no?
You're frightened for your future, are you?
Yeah,
sitting next to him?
absolutely.
Yes.
He was much
when you
more
start
frightened for his
talking
future. He
about
was
this-
sitting next to me, I think.
Craig, you've got a correct challenge and 15 seconds on models, starting now.
One of the finest models I ever made was a
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Well, he sort of stopped for
I
something.
knew he
But
did.
I mean, I don't know
He's
why.
actually just died.
This time.
In mid-sentence.
Derek got in 12 seconds, models, starting now.
When Landseer modelled the lions that were now in Trafalgar Square, he made them out of clay. They were very beautiful. They've been preserved, actually, in Victoria and Albert Museum. And if anybody would like to go and see his models, I recommend that they go on a cruise.
Well, Derek Nimmo was again speaking as the whistle went and gained a point for doing so. Other points were scored in that round, and I have to tell you, alas, that was the last round in this edition of Just a Minute. So let me give you the final positions. Peter Jones finished in a very good 4th place. Great value as always. Paul Merton just behind in 3rd place. Our first-time player of the game did extraordinarily well. Got a tremendous number of points. Didn't quite beat Derek Nimmo. He was one ahead. So we'll say Derek Nimmo is the winner this week. So we do hope you've enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute. It only remains me to congratulate and thank our 4 players of the game, Paul Merton, Derek Nimmo, Peter Jones and Craig Ferguson. And also our thanks to Jane Stevens, who's been blowing her whistle, keeping the score. And of course our thanks to Ian Messito, thought of the game, our producer Sarah Smith, who tries to keep us in order. And from them and me, Nicholas Parsons, thank you for tuning in. And I hope you'll be with us again the next time we play Just a Minute. Till then, goodbye. Thank you.